My name is Elizabeth Jones. Thank you for coming to this faculty research colloquium series to listen to Dr. Michael Berntsen. He is associate professor in the English, Theater, and World Languages Department. His greatest accomplishments include completing the Boston Marathon in 4.5 hours, congratulations, beating the Outer Banks Rooster Challenge, I would love to know more about that, and giving a lecture about Roland Kirk's impact on music for Radio C Lab 88.4 in Rennes, France. His works can be found in collections and journals, including MLA Teaching Resources, Teaching Shakespeare, Studies in Medieval and Renaissance Teaching, The Wider World of Jim Henson, Untoward Magazine, St. Sebastian Review, and Media Technology and the Imagination. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Berntsen.
Yeah, my greatest, the oyster thing, the oyster challenge was the greatest. My photos in the kind of like Hall of Fame on the wall and everything. We got free T-shirts, and yeah, it was great. Yeah, so hello, I'm Michael Berntsen. So I'll be talking mostly about moral injury, but kind of prefacing it with a couple other neurodivergent elements. And basically the main kind of thesis today is we need to do more to help neurodivergent people, let alone, of course, neurodivergent students. I put on some trigger warnings because it depends how the discussion will go. This is something I've also seen as a really good development for students to kind of prepare themselves mentally with topics that may be uncomfortable. So pretty much any discussion or in class or even online discussion that may lead to different types of heavy topics, I like to put on trigger warnings. When I teach film and lit too, I also put trigger warnings on for films and even in literature as well. Just because that, again, the research is preliminary on everyone's, and including my own, in terms of the kind of importance for trigger warnings in college and secondary ed and just general classrooms. But it's for something that I've definitely learned to help students. One of my main arguments, and this will, again, in terms of a preface, in terms of before I get into moral injury, there are no lazy students. And that's something that if you still think students are lazy, you got to get over. There are no lazy students. What they are they are possibly neurodivergent, or are they just living their lives in a different way, right? So they are prioritizing other classes over yours. Let go of your ego. Like that's the thing. Like just shut up. Like let go of your ego. It's okay, right? It's okay if they don't like this subject just as much as you do. That's okay, right? Let go, right? It's fine, right? You'll inspire the other students who love the topic, right? They are prioritizing life experiences. They are prioritizing work. They're prioritizing family, and of course, the most important, which so much research is coming out now because of neuroscience and all the kind of cognitive technology we do have now to measure brain outputs and all sorts of things that we didn't have access to even like 20 years ago. They're neurodivergent. Most people are neurodivergent. There are more people who are neurodivergent than realize. There's still so much stigma to elements related to being neurodivergent. All of us need to go to therapy. If you just thought, no, I'm fine, I don't need to go, no, shut up. You need to go to therapy. Everyone needs to go to therapy. Everyone needs to talk about stuff. They need to talk about emotions that they're bottling up because we do. This is the problem with what's happening, and this is kind of the topic that we're going to focus on today. Now, as I said, before I get into moral injury specifically, we really need to kind of focus in on a lot of different elements of neurodivergence. So, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, negative loop. This is, again, why there are no lazy students. Specifically, first-generation students, which, of course, obviously we are invested in, right, both financially and mission-wise at this university. First-generation students consistently show up to class, every class session. They do the homework, but they never do the major assignments. And part of this is because of a lot of anxiety being a first-generation student, as well as all these other things, right, that can create a lot of neurodivergent experiences. So this loop, right, if you just want to follow it along, right, falls behind in class, which creates more anxiety, increases stress. This reduces resource for problem solving, difficulty paying attention in class, difficulty understanding verbal instructions, difficulty understanding the task, not knowing where or how to begin the task, afraid to ask their teachers for help, becomes disorganized and forgets to back their homework, panics about forgetting homework, and it keeps going, right? This negativity loop is crucial because it doesn't just apply to anxiety, PTSD, ADHD. It also applies to a lot of just kind of general issues in life. These negative loops happen a lot. Addiction studies and all sorts of things play into that, right? You know, even if it doesn't matter what you're addicted to, you can be addicted to alcohol, you can be addicted to work, you know, that addiction does affect too how the brain processes everything, right? So we have to kind of think about these things. Obviously, as you know, we can't play psychologists, we can't solve them, right, in terms of each person's mind. But what we can do is create better course design to help these elements, right? Major issues, right? And if anyone's ever read The New Science of Learning, also, you know, you would recognize these elements. If you haven't read The New Science of Learning, sleep is so crucial. And I guarantee you, quick raise of hands online or whatever, how many people actually got a good night's sleep last night, right? Yeah, so not at least not one online. Yeah, you know, some of you don't have a window, but yeah, I guarantee you most of us are, you know, playing on very little sleep from day to day. Memory is affected by neurodivergent experiences, ability to process sound. Group work is one of the things that I actually have stopped doing in class. When you have multiple students talking all at once in groups, anyone who is neurodivergent, even if they don't know it, right, they will get anxious, they will not be able to focus, and they will not be able to complete the task. You know, that lazy group person who doesn't actually do as much in class, we think of as lazy. They're not lazy, they're probably neurodivergent, and numerous overlapping sounds are affecting their ability to process information. And again, you know, this is something that we have to really think about. I hate universal design. I think every kind of universal design framework is very ableist and disregards neurodivergent students especially. And I think this is why we have to rethink the kind of calls for, you know, universal design, which have been kind of, you know, playing within a lot of our paradigms. And I think we need to get rid of them because it is an extremely ableist idea that we all have these things that we could do, right? No, we can't, right? People with neurodivergent experiences have difficulties explaining thoughts, and they have difficulties rationalizing their actions and ideas. So if you have students, again, who have sensory issues, and a lot of us do, even if they don't realize it, this will affect how in-class discussions go, right? And this is, again, why I use Nearpod and other kind of tools in the class to kind of talk about and help, right, look at these kind of ways to decrease the anxieties within people in terms of how they learn. Now, all of this plays into moral injury. Moral injury is a kind of newish kind of idea that, again, you know, obviously you can see starts in about 1984, but it is still a very, very up and coming concept. It's been taken a while for people to kind of shift from PTSD to what is known as moral injury. The reason why it's the kind of term that's more popular with people is that it covers everything, right? PTSD, you know, we think of trauma response and all that stuff. Moral injury actually covers a lot more. And this is why we're kind of shifting into understanding moral injury. We all suffer from moral injury, all of us. Losing a parent, you know, getting into a car accident, getting overwhelmingly negative comments from a peer reviewer too, right? You know, just all this shit, right? Just builds our moral injury, right? Because it does prevent us from processing information because we're emotionally reacting and we are not rationalizing our thoughts, right? Moral injury stems from this idea of moral distress, right? Which again, coined by Andrew Davidson, who analyzed ethical dilemmas within nurses. He claimed that moral distress arises when one knows the right thing to do, but institutional constraints make it nearly impossible to pursue the right course of action. And again, think of just, you know, especially if we were in a different setting, secondary ed, elementary ed, our institutional constraints are going to be much more, right? And so education, again, needs to really consider these kind of moral injuries, not just with students, but also with teachers. So Shea, who is pretty much the founder of the moral injury concept, modify Jameson's ideas into what's called moral injury. And it investigates moral dilemmas military personnel and veterans experience. His definition of moral injury has three kind of components, right? It's present when there has been a betrayal of what is morally right by someone who holds legitimate authority, and a betrayal in a high-stakes situation, right? So it's present in all those things. And especially, you know, with the pandemic, we are all morally injured. I don't care if you're conservative or liberal, a lot of our just feelings of betrayal are all sorts of feelings of guilt, feelings of all sorts of things, right, occurred during those years, / are still present, right? So all these things really play out. And we're, especially when you think about the students who were in school and then out of school during the pandemic, we're going to get them in about anywhere from now, you know, to 3 to 5 years from now, and then even more, right? So we're going to be dealing with students who have a high trauma response for living everyday life. And that's going to affect their memory. It's going to affect their ability to listen, to do tasks and everything. So we are going to get a generation that is really traumatized, right? And not just because of the pandemic, but all sorts of elements in everyday life, right? And political life, you know, wars, everything, right? Probably economic collapse. You know, sounds like it's going to happen anytime soon, right? All these things, right? You know, will build into their ability to process information when we have them in our classrooms, starting, you know, basically this year to several years after that. We're going to have students who have had a lot of trauma and moral injury. Shea, in 2002, then expands moral injury's definition to include the betrayal of what's right in a high-stakes situation by someone who holds power. Brett Litz, in 2009, redefined it as perpetuating, failing to prevent, or bearing witness to acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations, may be deleterious, right, in the long term, emotionally, psychologically, behaviorally, spiritually, and socially. Right? Steinmetz in 2009 expanded the focus to civilian populations, arguing that any traumatic event can cause moral injury. And basically, from Steinmetz on, this is what we're looking at when we're studying moral injury and the effects on learning. Summer Constance, just in 2002, investigated how civilians reacted to a range of experiences from car accidents to sexual assault, to court verdicts, to show the effects of moral injury. Everything that we're processing on a day-to-day basis does affect us emotionally. We have to admit that, right? You know, if you're a person like, oh, I'm so blah, blah, blah. No, you're not. Your mind is doing things, right? You know, like your mind is doing things, right? You know, that you aren't even aware of, right? So this is an important element when, as we're designing courses, we need to kind of think about, right? So, let me go back here for a second, and let me make sure, yeah, there we go. So what I want to do for those of us who are in the Nearpod, and if not, I'll also start the activity, and then we'll kind of go back. So look at kind of stressors, traumas in your own life, right? Go through this list, mark down the ones that you recognize, right? See what you think, right? So when you look at it, right, the multiple elements, right, within our professional lives, both as students as well as teachers, right, that really show, you know, where moral injury can occur. And it's really important to look at, right, how, except for one attendee, right, we have numerous moments, right, and experiences that lead to moral injury. This affects our professional, right, lives as well, right? There are no lazy students. Guess what? There are also no lazy teachers. Even the teacher you think is not doing their job, right, is probably suffering from many multiple degrees of professional moral injury, and they haven't found a way to compensate, right? You know, even just, I'll use myself as an example. You know, there are so many times, you know, last semester, when we were told that we had to change the schedule right away, well, that makes me feel like not coming to work. That makes me feel like not wanting to do things right away, because if I change immediately, but then my demands are never met from the administration, they don't change immediately when I want them to change, right? But we have to change, right? That does create, you know, a moral injury, right? Because the people in charge are asking you to do things, right, that they wouldn't do to help you out. And that does affect how we perform, right, as professionals. So there are no lazy students, but there are also no lazy teachers, you know. And again, you may think of a teacher that like it is actually lazy. I guarantee you they're not. I guarantee you that, again, they are prioritizing other elements in their lives other than their job. And you know what? That's okay, you know. Now, again, does it affect us? Now it starts affecting, you know, your own performance because they're not doing what they need to do to help you out. Then you have to talk to them. But in general, we have to recognize that most of us are suffering from trauma in many different ways, and that doesn't go away quickly. It doesn't kind of soothe, right, in the mind very easily. In 2006, Brenner examined how trauma affects the brain at various stages of physical development. So, just to reiterate, right, trauma can affect memory and recall, stunt behavioral responses. So this is going to be crucial for the students who are growing up now and getting into college within the next couple of years who had a lot of stunted behavior responses because of the pandemic, right? We're going to notice, and all sorts of political climates, we're going to notice, I guarantee you, a lot more, and I already have data in my classes, face-to-face, not online, that their behavior is much more just unexpected and much more abrasive than I've ever seen in 16 years of teaching college. My last semester, I had a student, now this is face-to-face, because online is a little different. But face-to-face, I had a student laugh at another student's response. Never had to do that before. I've had a student say that all trans people should be shot. Yeah, and his defense was, well, I'm a good Christian. And I'm like, we read the Bible? I think there's something about murder and things. But we are in a situation where a lot of behavioral and verbal kind of responses have been, in a way, affected. So we're going to see different types of behavior, right, from other students. There also is, again, a diminishing concentration, and here we go, too, very important for us, an inhibit in language abilities and organizational association. Right? All these things are going to be in the next stages of students coming into college, and it's going to be really important for us to really think about how we can reduce stress, not only for ourselves, but for the students as well. And again, once you start reducing the stress for students, you'll find that you'll actually start reducing stress for yourself as well. My investigation on moral injury kind of started with the immediate day reaction when Trump was officially elected president, because I had a lot of students who were crying. I had a lot of students who were very upset. And again, if you vote for him, good for you. That's not debate. I'm looking at student reactions, and these are measurable reactions that I found with the students I taught during that fall 2016 semester. Out of 123 students that I interviewed, right? Their fear of hate crime increased. Their fear of losing LGBTQ rights increased. Their fear of losing women's reproductive rights increased. Hey, they were right. And then fear of religious oppression. Yeah, exactly. So these are students who had a moral injury immediately after they saw this person elected president officially. And we have to confront this, right? Because that is something that then, if they're worrying about losing their rights as a person, they're not really going to care about how we teach or what we're teaching, right? Unless they think it will lead to activism or something to help their individuality and identity. And that is something, again, that we have to confront, right? That when a person is fearing losing their entire personal freedom, that's important, right? Moral injury, on the reverse, also explains conspiracy theories and why everyone kind of gravitates to conspiracy theories. Because, again, the fear of institutional destruction, right? What's weird about moral injury, it also explains even January 6th, right? Because they believe that the election was legitimately stolen, that there are puppet governments and that deep state and all that. The deep state is a way for them to reduce their fear of institutional betrayal. Even conspiracy theories kind of play into all moral injury responses. Just to kind of show you in terms of our students' kind of experiences. So this is a fall 2021 survey. I had 157 students at that time. Out of that pool, at least 32 admitted that they were sexually assaulted. Almost about, I think it was 8. The number's a little unclear on the graph. Unfortunately, I need to fix that graph to give you the exact numbers. I think 8 experienced hate crimes. This was, of course, fall. Think about this one. 72 students had family or friend members die of COVID. Police harassment was about 23. Losing job was about 13. And then food insecurities was 55. I actually think that's pretty much linearly equal. I think it was about 55 or 56. This explains why people aren't paying attention in your class, right? You know, like, and again, it's not you. And that's the most important thing, right? Your ego can be preserved because it isn't you. You know, it's not you. So that, I think, is one of the most kind of crucial elements too. It's not you. It's not even the subject. It's their moral injury and their experiences and their trauma. I noticed, of course, too, as I was trying to collect more data, that I left out a couple of things, and I wanted to kind of examine a few things. So this pool of students from spring 2022, which was about 155 students, sexual assault was about 15, hate crimes 5, discrimination 25, police harassment 5, losing job was a few, not having a job, huge concern for these students, around 35, because it was around 35 of those numbers. Food insecurities around 15, and losing a family member. So instead of just focusing on COVID, I should have asked both questions, but oh well, can't go back in time. But losing a family member, right? And I didn't say friend, I should have also said friend. Again, this is what we learn when we kind of make mistakes and grow with our research. Around 40 had a family member lost. And again, even if whether that's at 5 years old or 18, that trauma is there and it lasts for a long time, especially if it's a very close parent, guardian, what have you, right? This affects how they learn. And we need to discuss, even if you don't want to, change anything you do in the classroom, just think about the impact of moral injury on people and their learning skills. We could also look at a couple other elements, right? Secondary traumatic stress, right? Emotional distress that results when the individual hears about the traumatic experience of another individual. That's something too we need to talk about under moral injury, right? Even if you don't have direct kind of traumatic experiences, if you are an emotional person, an empathetic person, a sympathetic person, you might actually have secondary traumatic stress, and guess what? It's just as important. There's no hierarchy in moral injury. Even if, like, whether it's a bad grade or a car accident, guess what? It's the same. Human brain is responding the exact same way. Trauma. That's it. There's no hierarchy, right? And that, of course, too, is something I think that's important to wrap our minds around, because we do kind of, loss of a parent is worse than a car accident. It's worse than, no, it doesn't matter. Mentally, cognitively, it's the same response. So guess what? Get over it. Just get over it. It is the same response. Same thing with secondary traumatic stress. It is the same as primary traumatic stress, right? It's the same emotional state. It's the same mental reaction. It's the same cognition, right? And so that does, guess what? Increase anxiety for people, right? So during the pandemic, you may not have lost family members, but you probably were feeling on edge when other people lost family members. Because guess what? If you're empathetic, you could realize it could happen to you and I. Someone gets into a car accident, right? Loved one gets into a car accident, right? You weren't in that car accident, but you might start thinking about that more. This when you get behind the wheel, right? And even though you didn't experience it yet, but that secondary traumatic stress is there, right? Hey, guess what? It causes burnout, right? Are all of us feeling burnt out, right? Did we keep on repeating that during the pandemic and now, right? That we're burnt out, We're tired of wearing masks. We're tired of doing this. We're tired of doing it. Yeah. It's because of trauma. It's trauma, and that's okay, right? That is a human biological imperative. That is an evolutionary trait, right? We are responding to that, right? Compassion fatigue too occurs, right, under moral injury. And so that idea is, again, something that we could kind of look into and consider just in terms of how we are feeling, right? Are we feeling powerless? Are we feeling numb, right? Because you have those reactions, right? Certain people just got numb to the pandemic, right? People were dying, but we just got numb to it because of our survival skills, right? So our survival instincts, right? That's all it is, right? So let's look at just kind of other experiences. And again, if you're willing to participate, please share. You don't have to. Again, names are blocked, so no one will ever see this information. But just kind of take a moment, right? See which ones kind of pertain to you. Did you experience anger after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade? Did you experience anger after the murder of George Floyd? Did you experience fear and or disgust during the January 6th riots? Did you experience fear, frustration, or guilt during the COVID pandemic? Have you experienced anger, fear, and or disgust at bills targeting LGBTQ+, especially transgender citizens? And did you experience anger, fear, or disgust at laws prohibiting drag shows recently? Think about that just briefly and mark which ones pertain to you. Kind of review. Because this affects us. This affects how we teach. This affects how we communicate with other people. This affects how we deliver information and how we process information. When we confront our emotional responses to exterior stimuli, whatever you want to call it, that does affect us, and we carry it with us. We try, and again, we could take the stoic route, we could take the bury the emotional route, but that's super unhealthy, and I would not recommend it. I would recommend that we have an open dialogue about our experiences and really start to understand how moral injury affects our brain and how our trauma and how our personal experiences and our emotion affect our brain. Because it's important, because as teachers, we need to learn every day how to improve, how to change, how to cope, how to share information, how to summarize information and deliver it to students. So thanks for sharing, everybody who has, and this is why, and again, I had no clue how this is going to go. This is the problem with being organic. No one could have participated, and I would have had to kind of reorganize my thoughts, but thank you for sharing your honest responses, because it matters, and I appreciate it, right? And it does help, because talking about this will kind of get to a point where we can actually improve our course design, our way we deliver material, and all sorts of things, right? So thanks everybody for sharing. I'm sure some people aren't going to like me for this, the new technology one, but it's true. So a couple of ways to rethink that is easy, and I'll take on the last one, the more controversial one at the end. Remove negative language from prompts and syllabi. Don't do this, don't do that. Yeah. Again, same thing, business writing, right? That's business writing 101. Avoid negative language. And we do it. I get to evaluate syllabi from everyone in my department, and it's a great thing to do. It's fun. Every single semester, I have to spend at least 2 weeks. It's great. I love it. But I do actually like it because it's a great cross-section of people using negative language versus positive language. Instead of saying, don't do this, avoid, right? Refrain from, very simple ways that we could turn positive language, or we could turn negative language into positive language. And we might not even realize we're doing it. And that's why I think sometimes students have more negative reactions, especially comments. When we grade and comment, are we more negatively minded, right, when we're grading, right? Or are we framing it in a positive way, right? Oh, when you do this, you want to avoid comma splices, blah, 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 right? Instead of that's a comma splice, or that's wrong because. Yeah, I hear that too. That's wrong because. When I was in the writing center, I saw comments. This is wrong here. It's like, oof, that's not going to help a student, honestly. Tests. One thing, there's a lot of research, weekly quizzes rather than midterms and finals. Now, of course, accreditation, we have to do finals and so forth. But in the classes where you don't have to, think about doing that. Having weekly quizzes rather than a midterm and a final. That seems to help with memory, processing information. And guess what? Even those quizzes, you could just have them rolling. You could have them scaffolded. You could have even like the first quiz repeated in the second, and then adding new questions. Like there's so many ways that you could kind of test their memory and test their understanding. More low stakes assignments too. This is something that definitely has been helping people, right? Have more low stake assignments. Instead of having that 10-page essay due, count for 40% of the grade, have that large essay due only for 15 and have all these mini assignments due for 40. That does kind of help students, especially first generation ones. Controversial, rolling deadlines. But yes, they help. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that rolling or open deadlines, guess what? It creates less work for you, because you can have that suggested due date of March. What are we today? March 22nd. Those students who do it, I give good comments. The students who submit after that, I give less and less comments. Every week, you can have less and less comments. You put it in your syllabus and you're fine, right? And it actually does help, right? Because guess what? The students who are going to submit late probably aren't going to look at our comments anyway. So why are we wasting time commenting on every essay March 23rd onward, when you could really help the students who actually submit on time, who want your feedback, who want to revise those essays. And then for those who don't, who just want that C, guess what? Less work for us too. Now, ChatGPT, yes, use it. Let students use it, yes. Now, plagiarism obviously is a thing, right? But for first generation students and for a lot of students, that blank page is really anxiety minefield. ChatGPT you could use, it gives you frameworks for essays, frameworks for literature review. They're not writing your entire paper. If you have students in class, take a day to kind of have them work with ChatGPT, character analysis essay, right? What's the framework for a character essay? What's the structure for a character essay? I've done this myself. It shows the students, oh, hey, so avoid over summary. For your first paragraph should connect it to the theme and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't write the paper for them, but it gives them an outline they could do. I've done this for literature reviews, annotated bibliographies. You could actually use ChatGPT to outline your essays. And you know what? That will help first generation students. Now, I don't have the data yet because obviously this is a new thing for me. I'm just trying it out this semester, but I guarantee you in 2 years, I will have a huge amount of data that shows ChatGPT is great for anxiety students, neurodivergent students, and first generation students to help build their papers. Instead of having a blank page, they could just follow a format. And I guarantee you that's what's going to happen. And yeah, I know, it's controversial, but I guarantee you I will have the measurable data.
I have a list of questions.
yeah. But again, it's the same as using example papers and all sorts of things, right? But they do have a page, a document, and template that they themselves can add to. And that I guarantee you, again, this is a hypothesis. I have no data yet. I will have data at the end of the semester, but that's my hypothesis, is that these things will help. These things are probably less controversial, but if you're not aware of them, there's a lot of good research out there to help reduce student anxiety, right? We suffer from moral injury in a variety of ways, right? We should recognize this to help ourselves, and that's actually priority number one. We need to be helpful teachers, and how we do that is confronting our own trauma, our own emotions, and all sorts of things. We need to be okay with ourselves, right? We will be teaching thousands of students in the next decade who have a variety of moral injuries that will affect their learning and how we teach. We need to understand this even at just a basic level. You need to understand why your students are going to act up more. You need to understand why your students just don't really work well when everybody's talking at once in a group kind of in-class session. We need to understand that and figure out what we can do to just slowly adjust. And so that's kind of my argument there. So, references, again, if you want to take a screenshot, these are the major, oh, it's a little cut off at the bottom, sorry about that. These are the major kind of tenets of moral injury. Again, there's Shea, that's the more recent one. Actually, a couple of formatting things happened there. Oh, well, that's what happens sometimes when you're using weird technology. I thought they look correct, but apparently when I was editing it, they were fine, but yeah, a little bit off things. But these are some of the major kind of ideas, besides, again, the ones that I brought up earlier, that are really kind of helping kind of learning and moral injury and all sorts of things, right? So again, I'll be happy to share even after. So like I do for my classes, you have an opportunity now if you want to post any kind of question in Nearpod, if you don't want to share verbally, or if you want to share verbally, feel free to shout out. But again, I want to thank you. I gave you a lot of, I'm sure, new information. And if it's old information reinforced, that's great too. But again, thank you for attending, both online and face-to-face. I know I probably made a lot of controversial statements, so I'm ready to defend them. But feel free if you want to shout out questions online, post them in Nearpod, or just shout them out face-to-face. Yeah.
You know me, I always want to shout them out. So several things. First of all, when you were describing all of the stresses and traumas of our students, I was getting increasingly stressed out.
Yes. Secondary, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I know that I'm suffering that. I mean, there's so many things happening, not to me, that I'm getting calls and But a couple of things. I hear a call for empathy.
Yeah.
Even from now you said this affects us as teachers. Well, I'm sitting here thinking about my students' evaluations of instruction.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And my self-evaluation, which is due in like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And are my students going to be gentle and assume that, you know, a bad class, you know, might have been due to something else going on in my life? I'm thinking no, because, you know, students don't have a sense that we do have lives.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think the institution does not.
Oh, no, it does. Yeah, it does.
So
yeah. No.
we
well,
can't.
We need to be honest
and
with
so
that.
one of the things you said was, you know, if a faculty member is not pulling their weight, so to speak, then maybe we need to talk to them. So I guess I'm a little, on the one hand, I guess I want to know, and maybe this, there's no way to answer this like on the spot, but I'm thinking about this, you know, as these recognitions, this acknowledgement. Finally, though, we do need to assess, right? And we are going to be assessed.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I like the idea of breaking big things down into smaller things, right? I mean, you know, not just a 10-page paper, but you know, these incremental, not just a final, but these incremental things and all that. I don't know. I don't know. I'm skeptical about about bunches of quizzes can add. I mean, maybe they can become study guides, right? But I guess I'm just kind of hesitant to give up on a midterm or final. Yeah. And you were probably expecting that.
Oh yeah.
Or and I'm also hesitant to just jump into ChatGPT. My students, at least they're not telling me. They apparently don't know what it is yet. Even my upper level students. But I mean, as you said, there are other resources that we can do, you know, samples from our previous classes, and there are lots of online resources that say, you know, well, what's a paragraph? How do you know when you see one? You know, kind of thing. So I guess I'm nervous about the underlying implications, like long-term maybe consequences of giving over to something like ChatGPT on the one hand, and then on the other hand, acknowledging and caring about our traumas and our neurodiversity, even knowing that in a capitalist society, we're going to run up against some problems
exactly.
as we try to make our way in the world.
Yeah. So what kind of question you want to ask, or what are you thinking about? Because all those ideas are like, everything you said is legit. So like, are you thinking more in terms of a question for me?
Yeah, what is your maybe solution or answer to the problem of assessment, either with students or ourselves?
Yeah.
Do we say, come tell me all your problems? Or do we say, let me know what's going on and let's go to CAPS? And how do we do that with our chair or our dean?
Well, again, the problem is, so I'm not proposing that we become psychologists. That's impossible. What I am proposing, and here's what I would say in terms of the administration needs to understand moral injury. So all your concerns about assessment.
So if you have it down, an up or down year or something.
Yeah, exactly.
COVID and you lost family members,
that
should be taken in.
And that's what we actually did at this institution. We're like, okay, under COVID, we're being like a little less particular. And like, why not do that every scenario, right?
But then you would have to reveal.
Well, exactly. But that's up to you. And that's the thing. Everything is a choice, right? And so, or everything is based on maturity levels too. Going back to like students and evaluation. To me, that's immaterial because their maturity level, and when you think about it, they're not teachers. So unless you tell them exactly like all the different teaching philosophies you're using, they actually can't assess us. Like if we're honest with student evaluations, right? One, we know from data that they are biased racially, gender, you know, male students get higher than female, right? Younger get lower than older, right? So, you know, beautiful people get higher ratings than, you know, what's not considered, you know, beautiful at the cultural moment, right? So like that's the thing. So to me, that's immaterial because moral injury there, like, we can't change every single facet of the world, but administration should understand moral injury. Administration should be knowledgeable about that and then kind of take into account. right?
So when you were talking about this earlier, and then I'll shut up, but what that makes me think, because there's been a lot of our articles, even lately, about how if we have been attentive to our students' trauma along the way, then we've just helped to create a bunch, a generation of people who are weak.
And that's confirmation bias. There's no data to that. All the data suggests when you go to therapy and confront your traumas, all the data says that's not true. That is a conservative conspiracy confirmation bias. That's not true. There's no data for that. Yeah, like there's none. Like when you actually do any research, there's no data for that. So that's the thing. Like, and again, change is scary. People, again, that's the thing. I'm proposing to change how we kind of design courses, and that's scary. And again, you don't have to buy into everything. I always change, based on new information too. Right. The one comment online too, I actually wanted to focus on, because they say I recently attended a presentation about the neuroscience of pedagogy, which emphasized the importance of sleep. Yeah, and I'm really interested in the concept. Yeah, so as I mentioned, let me get this online. The New Science of Learning confronts that too. So this is a book that really plays into that. Yeah, here we go. So if you're interested in learning, these are various editions, but yeah, the New Science of Learning from Terry Doyle, excuse me, and then Todd, I forget Todd's name, but it's Todd Zach Rejecek. Yeah, I don't remember. I met him numerous times. I always call him by his first name. I didn't even know his last name. Right? So yeah, that actually also confronts just sleep, everything, how and again, it's very neuroscience based, right? Yeah. How all these things affect learning. And again, when we have to kind of retool it on us, right, it also affects teaching, right? Sleep does affect teaching. Yeah. Oh, hold on. I think, Joe, did you have a question? Or?
I did not. I was derailed where we are.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah.
I wanted to jump on this.
Yeah.
There are several great TED Talks about this that I use in my freshman seminar class, and they love it. It's like, oh my God, I had no idea that studying after work until the sun comes up was no wonder I'm failing, I'm burning my candle at the lamp. I mean, it really has made an impact on students, many of whom are non-traditional.
Yeah. So I guess I do have something that's on topic. And I was wondering, so I agree that there's gaslighting of a weak generation because of the coddling, but what about the positive psychology having to do with like the importance of being able to kind of confront adversity? Like where is this navigating?
Well, that actually would be the same. Moral adversity creates moral injury as well. So confronting that, going to therapy or anything to do where it's the exact same kind of phenomenon, same issue. Yeah, that you should confront it. You should, talk about it and so forth, because issues that relate to adversity, chances are there's moral injury involved, because is it institutional, whatever, right? Who's betraying, or is making you feel powerless or whatever. Yeah. Who's oppressing you, and then so someone also echoed that about I'm more stressed now. Again, these ideas are important, and again, it is very stressful to really start thinking about all the trauma in the world. It is stressful, but it exists, right? But as I said, I think that there are measurable ways that we could really refocus our efforts to design courses that will reduce stress for ourselves as well as for students, because I don't think we should just reduce stress for students. It's also reducing stress for us and still making a fun class and a very kind of important class. And again, you don't have to buy everything I said. I know, again, I don't have data yet with the ChatGPT, but I guarantee you the data that I find will show why and how we could use it. And
I just have one more question. And it may be because I'm tired. But so I mean, you seem to be saying, talk about it, go to therapy, solve your problem, right? Face your adversity and solve your problem. But on the other hand, teachers should change, I can't think of a better word right now, adapt, I don't know, revise pedagogical approaches or instruments to accommodate those who are in the midst of trauma. So I'm wondering whether those scaffolds are crutches,
that to me, I would argue is ableist thinking, because that's where like the weakness, that is ableist bullshit. Trauma affects the brain permanently.
Right,
Even when even when you get, like, that's why, like, people who have moral injury, it doesn't stop.
Right.
Your brain is affected. People with PTSD, their brain is affected for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So no, that's the thing. Like, it doesn't go away. We don't solve anything.
Right.
But understanding trauma definitely will create better opportunities for learning ourselves and teaching and things like that. So yeah.
So that's the argument for these changes, that because you never know.
It's permanent.
People who are walking into
the room,
exactly.
Where
they are.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, and that's why I also brought up neurodivergent, because, and that's the thing, it's not just trauma, it's also that the trauma creates neurodivergence. And that's another aspect of why we have to think about this, because more people have ADHD than they realize. More people have anxiety than they realize. Again, we talk about capitalism. People can't get the proper care. So we are dealing with a country that barely can have access to mental health for its citizens. So citizens, students, and everybody have, like, we're actually lucky because at this university, we have counselors that help students on a day-to-day basis. Even NC State, there's been numerous suicides on that campus. They never had, like, you could only see a therapist for a week and that was it. And they now are going to implement this huge thing where they're going to have a therapist for each individual department that understands the needs of each. So yeah, like, these are the solutions that they have to come up with, right? Because they never properly confronted the mental health needs of their students, right? Luckily at this school, though, we actually have that in place where students can get kind of a weekly and daily kind of mental health.
Isn't that an interesting commentary too?
Yeah.
At NC State, with their admissions standards, did not think they needed the caps.
Yeah.
UNCP, with our population,
and
that we would need a strong, a robust,
exactly. Because most of us think in ableist ways, and that's it. Like, all of us, like, think in ableist ways, right? And that's another element where moral injury also helps kind of us to rethink that, because a lot of us have design courses based on tradition and ableist thinking, and that's the thing, and also too, like, my argument is always, show me the data that exams really help learning within your classes. Show me the data that essays actually help. Like, if you could prove the data, and you can, if it's designed well. But, a lot of us, again, final exam, we never see the student again. So it's like, okay, I guess they learned something, where we could measure what they learned within our classes based on week assignments, essay assignments, and all sorts of things that we could actually have measurable, especially if we have revisions within courses. We can measure progress pretty easily, right? And again, I'm also concerned about measurability, right? But that's the thing. Unfortunately, we are in institutions and traditions and paradigms that are ableist. And that's why I also brought up neurodivergent, because, again, trauma just doesn't disappear. It affects your brain permanently. And all the students who experienced the pandemic from ages basically like 3 to 18, their brains are broken, and will not be repaired unless they actually understand how to adjust to their traumatized brain, and that's the thing. And anyone who's traumatized, and that's why I use the word broken, right? They feel broken.
My son's light is flashing.
Oh, yeah. Again, this is heavy. That's why I put trigger words and all sorts of things. You're going to talk about all sorts of other things. But, like, that's the thing. It's like, we have to recognize our ableist thinking. And I'm saying have to, because you're going to have a bad time as a teacher in the next 5 years at least, if you don't at least consider that these people aren't thinking to full capacity, because they are not able to think to full capacity. They are traumatized. And you're going to have a bad time in your class, and like, that's the thing, we are.
I've seen evidence of everything.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
And one interesting thing that you said earlier about group work and why you don't do it anymore. I was actually really impressed with a student who said, early on in the semester, I wanted students to exchange, ideas after, anyway. And I noticed that this one student was not, I'll say, like, just kind of merge into it. And so I, people were talking, and I went over to her and I said, don't you want to join a group? She said, no.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And then as I got to know her, she and her research projects on autism, and she talks about how she's not autistic,
Yeah,
and, you know, the kinds of things that make her uncomfortable. And I was really, you know, impressed that she stood her ground, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And again, there are simple ways like
for
we
good
could.
reasons.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I didn't even go into autism because that whole spectrum is another neurodivergent. I was just using in general. But even if you love group work, like have them go into separate areas, right? Instead of just the one room. You know, you can still do things. Just all it is just shifting just a bit, right? We don't even need to do radical changes that much. You know, I just think that there's just things that we can kind of consider. Anyone else online? Any kind of questions or anything?
I don't think so. I am going to go ahead and end the recording
All right.
here.
Well, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you so much.